At the Reading Agency, we're passionate about inspiring people to read more, as we believe that reading can transform lives. 1 in 6 adults in this country struggle with reading and writing, but we know from the work we do that once engaged in reading, they want to carry on and of course improve their literacy skills in the process. One of the projects we run to support adults is the 6 Book Challenge, and 9,000 people took part last year. The trick is engaging them in the process, so we look with some envy at the ability of the gaming world to engage millions. To launch our report, Gaming for Reading, Tom Chatfield, author of Fun Inc., Why Games Are the 21st Century's Most Serious Business, chaired a round-table discussion to explore the links between gaming and reading and how we might adapt and enrich our own analogue game, the 6 Book Challenge.
The last video game I played was a little experimental game on the site Congregate. Well, thank you very much for having me here. I'm delighted to be here to be chairing this panel to discuss, I think sort of fairly loosely in some ways, this fascinating recent report about gaming and literacy and the potential relationship between them. And I say loosely partly because we're very much at the beginning of something, and I think if there's one thing that comes out of the report is that there's a staggering potential here in all sorts of areas, and that it's one that really we're almost barely beginning to see, that we're starting to explore. And so we are very lucky to have a very expert panel here to take us through some ideas that come out of the report and some ideas about where we might go from here and what the next step might be.
Well, what we did in the report was we had a look at the accessibility of games and assessed games ranging from the Wii Sports to games on the handheld DS through to Beatles Rock Band. And we found for the majority of them came out kind of a kind of low literacy level, so entry level 3, level 1, so lower than the average novel. We thought it was quite exciting, the accessibility of that, and obviously that relates to how many people play games worldwide. If they weren't accessible in that sense, then there wouldn't be as many players.
I think it's as much about getting people excited and engaged by stories as much as anything else. So it's interesting in looking at how the industry is sort of coping with dealing with text and how they're using it in the game. I think even little things like, for example, in Bioshock, where you can read advertisements and they tell you something about the world, or you can read the graffiti scrawled on the wall and they tell you about the world. Text is used quite a lot, but it's used sparingly, but it's used in a variety of different ways, which I think is very interesting.
I mean, one of the things that we've been very interested in to start is just looking at the strengths of text in terms of being far more receptive to really encouraging people's imagination in a way that other media can't. And I think in that respect, books and written stories and novels are as good and as captivating as they ever were. I've certainly played, particularly role-playing games, and particularly games like World of Warcraft, where text and story in the form of writing or maybe subtitles is really the best way to do world building, to do exposition, to do as reward or as challenges, as puzzles. So I think that it's interesting to kind of see the evolution of the way in which text and writing has been used in games.
And one of the things that I think is quite interesting is that there are a lot of young people who don't consider themselves to be readers. And one of the quite nice things can be sometimes to point out to them that perhaps they are. And so the sorts of things that Michelle was talking about, in order to play some of these games, you need to read a certain amount because that's the way that the characters communicate with you. And of course, when you're playing some of the online games, the massively multiplayer online games, you're having to communicate with other players in a written form. So I think that is very useful to recognise that people have those literacy skills which they might not actually think they've got.
I think the other thing as well, that what we've learnt over the years, Jill and I have worked together on a number of projects together, and what we've learnt over the years about engagement and motivation, that they are very powerful learning tools. So the opportunity for people to actually forget that they're learning and interact through the gaming technology and actually learn without it feeling like formal learning is actually quite important.
We are at a sort of very early stage as publishers in terms of transforming our business or transitioning our business to a business which is about the printed word, to a business that's about words however people want to read them. And I think that gaming and the associated technologies are a very exciting opportunity in all of that, because they provide us with access to so many more readers, particularly those who perhaps are put off, intimidated, or in other ways struggle with the printed book. One of the very interesting things I picked up in the report very early on was that, and it's something that we've heard before, was that simply the number of words on a page can be intimidating to some readers. So there's a lot that in this that enables us to kind of get away from those traditional barriers that have existed. And as a publishing industry, we've worked quite hard in the last maybe sort of 5-6 years on initiatives with the reading agency like Quick Reads, the 6-Book Challenge, all the partnerships work we've done with libraries. They have, for the most part, been concentrated around traditional books, and this, projects and reports like this just enable us to build on that work and take it forward and apply it to a digital environment.
The reading agency and the 6-Book Challenge might be able to move by sort of inviting authors or by showing authors a way to do experiments in more kind of interactive stories that could get people reading more, whether they're sort of simple graphical adventures or text adventures that are based off the books that are being covered in the challenge. I think that there's just a huge amount of interest from authors.
Something Adrian's saying popped up into my mind, and it's when both reading and writing is linked to gameplay and gameplay rules. That's, I think, when it really brings people in. And for example, I'm playing a game on my iPhone at the moment called Word Crasher, and I'm obsessed with it, and I even play it on my treadmill. And it's like someone's emptied a Scrabble box on the screen and you have to make up the words really quickly, and because there's rules to it, I feel my brain has got sharpened kind of every day I play it.
One thing that people talk about, that you've all talked a lot about, that kind of games are fun, and that fun element does kind of bring down some of the barriers about why you might not want to get into reading. But we've kind of talked about achievement, but also I think one thing that's accepted within gaming is that you fail, and that it's okay to fail, because you have another go. And with the social element of gaming as well, if you get stuck, there's normally somebody you can ask, or you can, if you've got the skills, you can go online and find someone else, or there'll be a magazine about it, or kind of a book about it, or like some really obsessive fan clubs about the games. But with reading, if you get stuck in a book, unless you're in a formal learning environment, you're not probably going to go and admit to somebody, I've got so far from the book and I kind of got a bit stuck. But with gaming, it's kind of okay to say that you've got stuck on things.
Well, I think the research report's quite an interesting step along the way. I think we do need to better understand the new media. We've already heard from the publishing side that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet in fully understanding the nature of learning on different media. But I still think there's a sense that teachers want learning to be fun, but there's a certain sense of guilt about using gaming technology for learning, and we need to actually free up teachers to say, actually, it's okay. It's okay to use gaming technology, provided your focus is learning and the learners are learning. Don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed, don't feel apologetic. And that the experimentation side of things is actually quite important to build up teachers' confidence in the use of new media for learning.
I think one of the great things that the Reading Agency has done over the last few years is to sort of widen the interests of other stakeholders within publishing, and specifically authors and the people who represent them, in appreciating quite how diverse their readerships can be, and engaging them directly with the people who actually read their books. And to take that forward and to bring our authors with us on this kind of digital exploratory journey is really, really important. And anyone who can play a role in that process is extremely valuable to any publisher.
We're talking there both about the sort of innate power of stories to pull people along, but also what sounds like the unique power of text. That text is still doing things for people that other stuff doesn't do, that it's not, text is not an outdated medium. It's something which speaks to people, which does things that you can't do in pictures, and that people are still hungry for text in their games, albeit presented graphically.
The Reading Agency will be taking this work forward by talking with games developers, publishers and potential funders. If you'd like to contribute to this debate and download a copy of the report, visit readingagency.org.uk.